Part 29. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 284. Wow ha ha ha. Sure enough it can melt Xintian Jingjin. In the Sky-Fire stove room at the top floor of Wei Suo's residence, the firepower of the 72 Sky-Fire Suzaku furnaces was fully on, and Wei Suo, who was fully inspiring the innate real fire, was more proud. I saw a piece of fine gold in the shape of a short silver stick. Under the dual burning of the innate real fire and the flame of the sky stove fired by Weizhuo, the color did not change at all, but there were signs of melting on the surface. This piece of stuff is Xian Tianjing obtained from the wind old monster. To be honest, Wei Suo wanted to practice flying sword for a long time. Now Lu Sanbao's big sword containing Tai Jingjin is not in his hand, but Wei Suo also has a dark green knife refined from the flying sword, and a black gold flying sword burned by yin phosphorite. Just now Wei Suo also tried the Jin Yun sword tactics with this Wu Jinfei sword. There are also squirrel-like willow-shaped flying knives, and a lot of fine gold that can be used to make flying swords from the Jinfa warehouse and later monks. The good materials on hand are always indispensable. However, if you want to refine a sharp flying sword, you still have to rely on Xian Tianjing and Niao Fajing. Obi Fajing and Xian Tianjing obtained from the ancestors of Xuanhuan and Feng Laojia, respectively, can be said to be completely free and sufficient in amount. The function of Xian Tianjing is to greatly improve the toughness and sharpness of Fijian. One can make the sharpness of a 3-foot flying sword of ordinary size fully increase by 1 grade, but Wei Tian's Xian Tianjing gold obtained from the old wind monster is as big as a small short stick. With so much Xintian Jingjin melting, it is estimated that the quality of Fijian is also scary enough. The role of Obi Fahing is that after the flying sword is made, it is plated on the surface of the flying sword, which has the effect of breaking the law and preventing the burning of magical tools such as negative phosphorus sand. Xuanhuan's old monster gave Wei Suo a full adult head, and a 17 or 8 flying swords were enough. However, these two materials have extremely high melting points. According to the old man in the green robe, it is necessary for at least the 5-level monk of the split-level high-level kung fu to use the fire control technique to fully cooperate with the ground furnace to melt it completely. Now that Fajing is in hand, and Wei Suoxiu has completed the quadruple cultivation of the split-level realm that has reached the mid-level of the prefecture level, think about it should be enough, plus the method of melting the sword tire. Wei Suo already knows that no green is needed. Under the guidance of the old man in the robe, Weizhuo can also operate, and the firepower of the stove on this day does not lose the high-level stove at all. In this way, Wei Suo certainly couldn't help it, and immediately went to the Tianhuo furnace room to practice. Now that he is able to refining Xintian Jingjin, Wei Suo is very proud, and at the same time, he is greatly encouraged to continue to maintain the innate real fire. After an hour, this Xintian Jingjin really turned into a silvery liquid. Hey! Wei Suo threw the dark green knife into it excitedly. Just a moment later, the dark green knife was melted directly and melted into this group of Xintian Jingjin. After that, Wei Suo also threw the Wujin Fijian, which had been burnt by yin phosphorite, into it. It was probably only about a cent of incense sticks, and the Wujin flying sword was completely melted into the gold liquid ball. However, because the material of the Wujin flying sword itself was not good, and had not been refined, Wei Suo first refined the dark silver spheroid. After that, Wei Suo also threw the willow-shaped flying knife of the mouse whisker into it. It's extravagant. Anyway, it's a magic weapon of inferior order. But this magic weapon has been refined, there are no impurities. Throwing this willow-shaped flying knife into it, and looking at the gold liquid slowly melting into the flame, Wei Suo teased himself. Later, Wei Suo took out another piece of fine gold and threw it inside. Because it took a lot of time to refine Xintian Jingjin and later refined Jingjin, it was already dark at this time, and the figure of the old man in green robe emerged from the ghost raising jar that he placed not far away. The old man in the green robe that came out just heard Wei Suo's 2 words, and saw Wei Suo throwing the fist-sized fine gold in his hand into the fine gold liquid ball. Wei Suo, what are you doing? The sight of the scene, the old man in green robe suddenly screamed and screamed. You come out, old man, scared me. Wei Suo suddenly smiled when he heard it, and shook his head proudly. What can I do? Refining the Fijian sword tire said this after a sentence. Wei Suo also took out the Xuanhuan ancestor from Nabeo's pocket and gave him a piece of full-sized skull-like Obo crystal swaying in front of the green robe old man. I found such a large piece of obscure crystal, old man, didn't you say that it can be plated with 2 layers at most? Don't say it is 2 layers, 17 or 8 layers are enough. You say we are such a big piece of Zintian, add it in, and then apply these 2 layers of obsidian crystal. This flying sword should be sharp. I have thought of the name of the flying sword, so I called it you sister, because then we will use such a sharp flying sword. When he came out, the other party would definitely couldn't help but scream your sister. Your sister, the old man in green robe almost died with black eyes. After some relief, the old man in green robe gritted his teeth and nodded the ball of fine gold that was tumbling in the flames. What you just thrown in is the metamagnetic fine gold. It's Yuan Si Jingjin, what's wrong? Wei Suo looked at the old man in green robe inexplicably. This flying sword melting method is what you told me. It's very simple. Is anything wrong? That's under normal circumstances. The old man in the green robe wished to strangle Wei Suo's expression. But you are refining this flying sword now, to rush to participate in the sea hunting conference. Is there any difference? Wei Suo froze. The old man in green robe was speechless for a while, and then he resisted the urge to vomit blood. He said, the difference is that without the addition of magnetic fine gold, the magic circle of this flying sword is not so complicated. It is estimated that the level of refining equipment has been tried for more than half a month, and almost a flying sword can be successfully refined. After adding metamagnetic fine gold, the magic circle of Fijian is a composite magic circle. You must first arrange a magic circle that controls metamagnetic fine gold, and then add the rest of the magic circle. The composite magic circle is 10 times more difficult than the ordinary one. At your level, it is estimated that 2 or 3 months it may not be possible to refine it. Isn't it? Wei Suo's eyes swelled out. You didn't say that early. Don't blame me, the old man in green robe rolled his eyes and added, if the sword tire is mixed with metamagnet fine gold, it is useless to add the magic circle that controls the metamagnet fine gold first. Isn't it? Wei Suo suddenly screamed, old man, you mean to say, even if I don't need the power of this meta-adaptive gold now, I can't refine this mass of gold into an ordinary flying sword? The old man in green robe said deeply, you asked this question too late. Look at what you mean, then it's impossible to tell if this Yuan Jingjing finance is inside. Wei Suo looked at the old man in green robe with tears. The old man in green robe looked at Wei Suo and nodded, you know too much. No. Every day, the sky-fire furnace room of Wei Suo's residence almost rang out a wailing sound like a crying wolf. Don't waste your time and time. I told you that even when we were at that time, Baikan, the most powerful sword sculptor on the Tianqian continent, could not have done so when he first began to make flying swords. Quickly refining it into a flying sword with complex engraving. 17 days later, in front of the 72 Skyfire Suzaku furnace, Wei Suo with a smoky look on his face was crying and looking at a 3-foot-long silver scrap iron-like flying sword in his hand. This flying sword is uglier than a tree fork with silver juice. At the moment, the old man in green robe looked at Wei Suo with contempt. On that day, he made his own assertion that, without waiting for the guidance of the old man in the green robe, he melted the Yuan magnetic fine gold into it. Of course, Wei Suo was not reconciled. After all, the flying sword with Yuan Jingjin power is the best way to match the Jin Yun sword tactics. So in the next 17 days, Wei Suo will take time every day to try the flying sword several times. But after these 17 days, the results are the same. This kind of complex magic circle is too mysterious and complicated. It is okay to be a layer of meta-environmental gold, but after the completion of this magic circle, a layer of flying swords must be placed on it. Phalanx. This kind of arrangement of the magic circle on the sword itself is to control the fire by the consciousness and condense the innate real fire into a very thin line of fire. And a magic circle is tens of thousands of runes, not to mention a slight deviation of the fire line, cut off the rune of the previous layer, even a little control error, flew a Mars and splashed the upper layer of runes in the pattern, it is possible that the previous merits will be abandoned. Grandmas. Looking at the silver sword tire that I don't know how many times I have remelted it, Wei Suo groaned, but suddenly this pothole was hollow again, which was even uglier than a tree fork. The sword tire was thrown into the sky fire and smelted again. Why don't you give up? The old man in the green robe was a little unbelievable, but what made his eyes round suddenly was that he saw Wei Suo taking out all the pieces of fine gold again, and threw it into the sky fire, first melted, and then wrapped directly towards the silver sword tire that had not yet melted. Why saw, what do you mean? The old man in green robe yelled suddenly after he froze. I didn't ask you just now, did you say that after the magnification of the magic circle, the effect is the same? Wei Suo took another piece of Xuanhuan fine iron, and threw it in. You mean, the old man in green robe froze again. With such a small sword body, such a complex formation should be gathered in that little place. It seems that no matter how you practice before the sea hunting conference, you can't practice it. It seems that you can only make the sword body bigger. It may be possible, Wei Suo muttered. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 285. No, bigger. It still doesn't work, a little bigger. It still doesn't work. It seems that it has to be a little bigger. In the following days, the old man in the green robe was fortunate enough to see the process of a Fijian sword tire growing continuously in the history of Fijian refining. Is this a handle flying sword? After 10 days, when the old man in green robe looked at Wei Suo's newly refined sword tire, he was completely speechless. While visiting Jiya on the side, seeing Wei Suo's latest flying sword tire, she couldn't help but giggling over her mouth. Who said it wasn't a flying sword? Look, this sword blade has all its blades and handles. Wei Suo looked at the flying sword tire with the same door panel. He was so bullish when he said this, he couldn't help himself. Now this dark silver flying sword has a full body, and it is one head taller than Wei Suo. To be honest, the handle of this flying sword is not smaller than the average flying sword. But placed on such a large flying sword, it is really unremarkable. Anyway, if this flying sword tire is thrown outside, the passing monk will definitely not think it is a flying sword. If this flying sword is really made, then when it is used against the enemy, it is really too personal. Maybe the other party will be dumbfounded and call your sister. The flying sword tire with the same door plate rolled in the flame of the sky stove, because the handle of the flying sword is really large, so the flame of the sky stove and the innate real fire inspired by Wei Suo can only almost this handle. Fijian sword tire wrapped around. After nearly a month of practice, Wei Suo is already familiar with refining the flying sword. After controlling the fire power and keeping this flying sword tire in a state where it will not melt, Wei Suo will immediately start working on this sword. Engraved on the body array. I saw a group of innate real fires under the control of Wei Suo's consciousness. First, it became countless thin lines of fire. When I extended it to the sword, there appeared a very thin mysterious rune on the sword. Then a congenital fire inspired by Wei Suo condensed into a fire needle thinner than the hair, and moved quickly up the sword. It took Zhang a full time, and both sides of the sword body, including the hilt, were covered with fine lines of varying depth and thickness. After this layer of runes was completed, a hint of silver flashed in the runes, and the clunky sword body suddenly had a little more aura. Obviously, this layer of control element magnetic fine gold is successfully completed. But the old man in green robe still sneered. Because the most difficult thing is the next layer to control the formation of the magic circle and the connection of this magic circle. The following control circle is more cumbersome than this circle, and many runes are swimming in the gap between the existing rune of this circle. Successfully completed the first step, and then missed the next step. Successful. From the perspective of the old man in the green robe, Wei Suo is still unlikely to succeed this time. Although this kid looks very talented, after all, this compound formation is too complicated, but he never thought of it. What's more, this time, Wei Suo didn't seem to have any problems at all. With the last one of the fine needles condensed by innate fire, there was another layer of finer runes covering the sword, and layers of aura. It is obvious that it has flowed out from these two layers of runes. It's done. The sweat-stricken Wei Suo looked at the doorplate flying sword glowing layer by layer, and couldn't help but feel a little dazed. Still stunned. Hurry to reduce the fire power according to the law, or even if it is completed, the magic circle will also be burned, the old man in green robe cried when he saw Wei Suo in a daze. Hearing this cry from the old man in the green robe, Wei Suo responded. As he woke up, he slowly lowered his fire power, allowing the sword body to cool down without any deformation. Half an hour later, the last innate real fire was also taken back by Wei Suo, and the whole handle was still flying with a scorching door blade, which was captured by Wei Suo. Wei Suo couldn't help but tried it according to the sword tactics. I saw that as a piece of purple real element permeated into this flying sword was immediately silver-white aura, and the whole body immediately seemed to be wrapped in a layer of silver-white oily light, and instantly became absent what weight is average, suspended in front of Wei Suo. Really done. Seeing such a scene, Wei Suo was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth, and immediately took out the powerful silver test piece of the test instrument from the Nabeo capsule. After erecting Qianlian silver, Wei Suo stretched out his hand in accordance with Jinyun Jianju, and saw that the flying sword that was floating in front of him suddenly flew out, and suddenly fell again before it was cut into Qianlian silver. A layer of yellow light suddenly didn't know how many times he was heavy. With a loud noise of dang, Fijian slashed on Qianlian silver. No. Not only Wei Suo and the old man in green robe, even Jiya's eyes were suddenly rounded. This ordinary magic weapon hits thousands of silver refining, either cut a trace, or hit a deep pit. But the door flying sword was cut up, but it was cut like a piece of rotten iron on the flying sword. What kind of power is this? After studying for a long time, Wei Suo came to a conclusion that his flying sword was too big, too thick, and too heavy. At the moment of cutting it, it had already bent it. Pressed to the top, it is difficult to see the specific power of this flying sword with this piece of silver. Wei Suo, what are you doing? Jiya saw her tongue straight out. When Wei Suo's door-like flying sword was just cut down, it felt like a hill was pressing down. To her surprise, however, after Wei Suo removed Qianlian silver from the sword, he took out a lot of low-grade fine gold and quickly smelted it on the sky stove. This 1000 smelting silver is too light and thin compared to it. I come to make a thick gold plate, and put this 1000 smelting silver on it. You should be able to see what kind of power my flying sword probably reaches. Wei Suo replied. The old man in green robe pouted. Wei Suo's method sounds very old-fashioned, but it is still very practical. The main thing is that this general refined finance is quick to refine, and it does not require much effort. It's just that the time for Yuxiang is not enough. Wei Suo made some relatively low-grade, unusable gold and black iron into a thick steel plate that is more than 1 person tall and more than 2 feet thick. After flattening Qianlian silver on the surface of this thick steel plate, Wei Suo felt that the furnace room was too small to open a bit, so he put the flying sword like the door plate and this thick steel plate into the nabeo. In the middle, brought to the hall below. After the thick steel plate was erected in the hall, he looked at a flying sword that was bigger than himself. After a little sweat, Wei Suo squeezed out a sword tactic. The sound of dang exploded. The silver and yellow shining sword light was cut on the thick steel plate. The general flying sword is flying and chopping up, that is, when the sword light flashes, it is called chopping. But Wei Suo's flying sword chopped up, giving the impression that the word Xuan was like a big guy slammed into it. No. What made Wei Suo's eyes almost bulge was that the whole thick steel plate was suddenly torn apart, and together with the 1,000 silver refining above, it was torn apart. I rely on, the old man in green robe almost passed out. So a large amount of Xi and Tianjing financial refining into it, the power of this flying sword is extraordinary, that is certain, especially Wei Suo's non-stop refining, also seems to be refined over and over again. How to say, this flying sword, it should not be a problem to be exerted by the current Wei Suo to reach the magical power of Dao rank inferior. It was also in the anticipation of the old man in green robe that the 2,000 silver slivers were cut in 2 pieces, but at the moment the scene was torn apart, but he never thought of it. Where are you still called Fijian? It's really a door after all. The old man in the green robe looked at Wei Sudeo silently. Don't tell me that this Fijian is taught by me in the future. I can't afford to lose this person if you refine it. Haha, Wei Suo didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, the more he looked at this flying sword, the happier he was. It's hard to see if it's hard to see. It's just as powerful as it is. It's at least more powerful than the Taoist inferior magic weapon. Is it powerful? Looking at Wei Suo with 2 golden eyes, the old man in green robe felt it was difficult to communicate with his own taste. After rolling his eyes, he didn't want to talk to Wei Suo. But Wei Suo was excited to play this flying sword. I saw this flying sword flying under the Emperor of Weizhou in the hall. Because of the high relationship between the element magnetic fine gold and the old man of the green robe, the speed of this flying sword flying in the air is actually far beyond the ordinary flying sword. When using Jinyun Jianju to cut it all at once, the air under the flying sword was violently slammed. I don't know how much the weight of this flying sword reached. Anyway, it does not feel like a flying sword. It looks like a heavy rolling magic weapon. The most mysterious thing is that when the sword is used to control this flying sword, if there is an arrogant golden spirit, it will flow out of the sword and enter into his body. It seems that the comment of the sea fairy should be true. This Jinyun sword tactic has been used for a long time, and it is very likely that a golden spirit root will be cultivated. After playing for a while with great satisfaction, Wei Suo took away the flying sword again and returned to the sky fire furnace room, making the already completed flying sword a little more powerful and plated with ethereal crystal. There is no more technical content in this obsidian crystal, plus the obi crystal that Xuanhuan ancestor gave him is large enough. It is enough to plate 2 layers on this flying sword. Your sister, looking at Wei Suo's enthusiasm for the plated obscure fahing, the old man in green robe couldn't help saying such a word. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 286. I'm afraid the Haixianzong is really getting close. Day by day, this has become the most frequently mentioned sentence by monks in Haixian City. The speed of the aura in Haixian City is beyond the imagination of almost all monks. Just a few months, and when there are 5 days away from the sea hunting conference, the aura in the entire Haixian City has become so thin that it almost feels no. By this time, even if a monk absorbs for more than 10 days, he may not be able to absorb the aura of an inferior spirit stone. Such a thin aura has little meaning for many Zhou-Tianjing and Fenianjing monks who settled here in order to improve the speed of cultivation. And Haixianzong has now completely cancelled the cost of the spirit stone staying in Haixian City. Only the monks who rented their residence in Haixian City have to pay the cost of the spirit stone. Boom. But just in the middle of the night, only 5 days away from the sea hunting conference, a huge roar came suddenly in the inner city of Haixian City. Did the sea fairy statue fall? This sound is like countless big stones carrying wind and thunder, falling from a very high altitude and crashing into the sea, bringing up a huge sound of water. Reminiscent of the red jade lotus in the hands of the sea fairy statue completely broken, many monks in the city of the sea fairy, even the first time such thoughts came to mind. What's the matter, what is the sound? But when these monks ran out of their respective residences, they all saw the statue of the sea fairy on the top of the sea fairy city, and the entire sea fairy city was no different. How did Elder Wei make such a big move? This is the sound of Xuanhuan's excitement? Impossible. If this is the sound of Xuanhuan's excitement, at least Tianjigong. The two disciples of Haixian sect wearing silver shirts next to Wei Suo's residence had a horrified look on their faces. Now in the residences on both sides of Wei Suo, there are also disciples of Haixian Zong. Once these disciples were protecting Wei Suo, but if Wei Suo came out with any requirements, they could be immediately communicated to the ancestors of Xuanhuan. Anyway, Xuanhuan's ancestors put Hai Xianzong's most of his future on Wei Suo, and now Wei Suo enjoys the super first-class treatment of super elite disciples. These two silver shirt disciples, but they heard very clearly, that amazing sound came from their Elder Wei residence, and the sound just now, it is like a monk testing his own truth. Yuan Zhao Wei made a sound when all the true elements in the Shenhai oscillated. But the sound was so loud that half of the monks of Haixian City heard it. If it is really the sound of Xuanhuan's concussion, this is only a heaven-level low-level exercise, and I am afraid that it must be divided into at least 4 levels of cultivation. 2. But this Elder Wei is only 27 or 8 years old. Even if it is a cultivation level exercise, it is impossible to achieve such cultivation. Old man, what's going on? Why is this Bulletin Tiandan suddenly useless? When the two Haixianzong disciples thought it was impossible, the 14 regiments on Wei Suo's body shone so that the entire quiet room became purple, and the Shenhai Guanghua was slowly disappearing. He held a round elixir in his hand. This elixir was like a crystal jade. It had a bluish yellow, translucent elixir, but it had a nice silver texture inside. This panacea is obviously Buishandan. Ever since the old man in the green robe with his handle saw a flying sword with 2 layers of obscure crystals on it, he could not help but scold you sister, and after the completion of the flying sword, Weizhuo began to work hard to refine it. Bulletin Tiandan. Because according to the previous experience, if you want to upgrade from the mid-level prefecture to the low-level celestial level, you don't need 10,000 to make up the Tiandan, or at least 9,000. According to Weizhuo's refining speed of several hundred seeds a day, it should be at least close to a month. In fact, it was the same. Wei Suo kept working day and night, and it took 26 to 7 days. It was only 5 days from the sea hunting conference before he finally promoted the Zixian Zhenju to a low-level exercise. A total of more than 10,500 pills of heaven and earth were consumed before and after. The true elemental power of this level exercise was really amazing, and its true elemental turbulent sound really reached the level of the legendary high mountain rolling boulder and Chaluhashink Tao. But in the past half a year, Ji Ya has refined a total of 12,000 Bulletin Tiandan. Now Wei Suo has nearly 1,500 Bulletin Tiandan left on hand. What makes him depressed is that he is now refining and replenishing Bulletin Tiandan, and he feels that he has no effect at all. After the number of refining Buishandan increased, he also clearly felt the resistance. The later, the weaker the potency of Buishandan. But it seemed that after his Zixian Zhenju was promoted to the lower level of the celestial level, this Tian was suddenly useless. I don't know, the old man in green robe said, simply looking at Wei Suo with a depressed face. I don't know. You taught me to refine this thing, but you are so embarrassed to say you don't know. Nonsense. The old man in the green robe gave Wei Suo a white glance. The materials of this makeup pill are very scarce at that time. It is very rare for ordinary monks to refine 10 or 20. How can it be like now, even 1/10,000 are made out? It seems that at that time, no one could ever use Bulletin Tiandan to promote low-level exercises to Tianti exercises. Wei Suo silently looked at the old man in green robe. Bulletin Tiandan, wouldn't it be this? The effect can only be made up to the level of the sky, and it is invalid for the level above the level. It's very simple to judge whether this is the case, the old man in green robe said neatly. Anyway, it breaks into the 5 points of divided thought. Before hitting Jindan, you must take purple fox flowers. After pursuing the purple fox flower, try to refining a Bulletin Tiandan to know whether it is because of drug resistance or whether Bulletin Tiandan only has such effects. Well, that's the only way. Anyway, if Tiantiandia wants to use it, it is also useful. After thinking about it, Wei Suo collected all the remaining Tiantiandan first, then suddenly he smiled, and then he reached out and took out something. Your sister, the old man in the green robe could not help crying as soon as he saw something taken out by Wei Suo. Because Wei Suo took out the same flying sword as the door. Now after 2 layers of obsidian crystals are plated, this handle was originally a silver-white flying sword, but it has become golden and bright, and looks like it was made of pure gold. And the most important thing is that the magic marks inside the magic circle have also been covered by the coating of obifa ink, making the surface of this sword look without any patterns and ornaments, which is more old-fashioned than before. No wonder the old man in green robe couldn't stand it anymore. The old man in the green robe thought that if Wei Suo would carry out this sword and cut people, then there would be no master style, and it seemed that there would be as many rich men as there are rich men. Haha. After Wei Suo's smug smile, he put away the flying sword again. Okay, old man, there should be time to refine a magic weapon next time. Now there is this flying sword and blood-eating magic knife. Hand, the attack power should not be a problem. The ancestor Xuanhuan should at least also give me a spirit-level high-level attack magic weapon for you. Think about it, with the materials on hand, we can still refine something. Do useful magic weapons come out? Why, don't you want to try your power to reach the lower level of heaven, the power of this flying sword? The old man in green robe saw Wei Suo take off the sword, and heard Wei Suo say this again, suddenly stunned. Suddenly. There is nothing to try. Thousands of refining silver are all torn apart. It is not torn apart to try again. By then, how powerful the defensive weapon against the other people will be. If you don't try, what did you just take out? The old man in green robe asked, very puzzled. Wei Suo haha smiled, nothing, just look at you is too arrogant, take it out and see your reaction. After that, Wei Suo took out the scary door-like flying sword from Nabeo's pocket and shook it in front of the old man in green robe. Your sister, the old man in the green robe almost passed out, and could not help crying, Wei Suo, if you have nothing to do with this sword to show up in front of me, you don't want me to teach you how to refine now. Well, the next time I don't use it, the trick is not to take it out. Seeing that the old man in green robe was going crazy, Wei Suo laughed and put away the flying sword. Grandmas, the old man in green robe glared at Wei Suo fiercely. After thinking for a while, he said, you take out the 2 bat wings of the black bat pterosaur. Good, Wei Suo suddenly excited again, without a word, took out the 2 bat wings of the black bat dragon. 3 days later, a disciple of the Haixian sect wearing a silver vestment passed through the crimson mask outside Wei Suo's residence. After this disciple of Haixianzong stood in front of Ling Tian, he did not put down a treasure chest as usual and left. Instead, he stood respectfully before Ling Tian without making any sound. Elder Wei. A moment later, Wei Suo wearing a blue robes flew out of his residence, and after seeing this disciple of Haixian sect salute him, he immediately asked, what's the matter with you coming to me? Elder Wei, the disciples were ordered by their ancestors to remind Elder Wei that they would leave for the sea hunting conference early in the morning. Then it is up to the disciples to welcome Elder Wei and gather together after Xuanhuan's departure. The ancestor said that as for the companion of Elder Wei, he can stay here or go to the meeting place of the sea hunting conference with him to wait for the victory of Elder Wei's flag. The disciples of Xuanzong still took out a treasure trove and handed it to Wei Suo. This is the magic weapon that the ancestor asked me to bring to the elders. The elders can familiarize themselves first. Asterisk. Latitude now has an iPad reader, Landscape HD. Used it, it feels good. You can update the latest chapters online every day, and then read offline. When you want to find a book, there are various real-time lists of vertical and horizontal, and you can also search on the site. The brightness can be adjusted so that reading is not dazzling after dark lights at night. Brothers with iPad, you can try next. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 287. Kumu Island's regulars, don't take the detour. The monks led the team during the split period, seeing the three methods of fighting. There is no danger out of the sky dome, you must hurry. Excellent flying escape tool, flying smoothly and fast, half RI to the Blackwood Islands, only 5 inferior spirit stones to and fro. Refractive instruments are sold, and the price of vomiting blood is thrown away. It is clearer to see the fighting method. The sea hunting conference is a rare event for the monks around Haixian city. Haixianzong, Zihuizong, and Minjiayuanzong, these three are the largest gates among the three nearby cities. In the past few sea hunting conferences, I watched the excitement, to see what the three top disciples looked like, what kind of cultivation thoughts, or to see for yourself which disciples of the final victory came out. There are also many monks who can enjoy the excitement of this moment and watch. But this time is different from the previous sea hunting conference. Mingyuanzong also prepared a lot of refraction realm. When the festival is out, it can cover many areas in the Blackwood Islands, allowing outsiders to see part of it of the scene. This is equivalent to seeing the monks of the sea hunting conference, and you can see the fighting scenes of the top Jing English disciples in the three major schools. As soon as the definite news came out, the surrounding cities suddenly became a sensation. At the beginning of the sea hunting conference, the surrounding cities can be said to be very lively. I saw a group of monks who rushed to the Blackwood Islands in an endless stream. The Blackwood Islands are more than 30,000 miles from Haixian city, but before the noon of the official start of the sea hunting conference, when the three monks have not yet arrived, at least 4 or 5 have gathered on the sea outside the Blackwood Islands. Thousands of monks who came to see the bustle. This Blackwood Islands is also very unique. There are hundreds of large and small islands gathered together, thousands of miles away. Most of them are implicated, and most of the islands it is a kind of tall black pine wood, and it is because of inaccessibility, so it looks like a poor mountain and bad water. It is best not to go in and look for death. On a piece of black reef in this group of islands, there is a white jade platform that can hold hundreds of people. The white jade platform rests on the black reef, like a large plate, resting on an egg. It seems that it may fall at any time. But now the white jade platform does not move in the wind and waves. It is obvious that there is a magic array. The 4,000 or 5,000 monks who came to see the crowd gathered around this platform. Because this platform is clearly where the three monks are staying, and this sea hunting conference is the top character of the three monks, Monk Jindan will be present, and no one who is watching the lively monks will dare to go to stay on it. Look. What is that? It's overwhelming. Zihuizong's person is here. Suddenly, there was a sow movement among the monk groups gathered around the sea, and many monks leaned their necks and looked into the sky behind. I saw a purple iris with amazing speed, flew by. This purple iris is a long purple silk with a width of several feet and a length of more than 50 feet. There are countless stars and stars shining on it, flying in the sky, just like a horizontal purple SE long bridge. On the top of Changja, there were more than 30 monks standing. the first one wearing a purple foundation, but the monks who wore a robe of silver shining constantly. This monk looked like he was only in his 40s, and his face was like white jade, exuding an indescribable sense of majesty, and the aura exuded from his body was naturally condensed into the shape of a lot of green Ganoderma. Dan gasified, when did Zai Wei Zong again have a Jindan monk? At a glance at the scene, a few monks standing on a blue jade basin-like instrument at the corner of the sea suddenly couldn't help but whispered. There is another Jindan monk out there. This person is clearly the only Jindan monk Zixing real person in Ziwi Izong. One of these monks stood lean on a black turtle-like magic weapon. The middle-aged King Bao monk suddenly retorted somewhat disdainfully. This deist. The monks turned their heads in amazement, and one of the honest grey-robed, chubby monks arched their hands politely, saying, Zixing is a real elder of the Ziwei sect, but it's more than 180 years old. If it were him, how could it look so young? That's because the Deluo Tianju of Zixing's real repair has the effect of staying in the face. So although he is more than 180 years old, he still looks like a Taoist in his 40s. Skinny middle-aged young robe monk glanced at the grey robe and chubby monk, and said, It seems this deist knows very well about the three cases. The grey robe and stupid monk glanced at each other, admiring. I don't know which case the deist is optimistic about at the sea hunting conference. Originally I was optimistic about Ming Yuanzong. The speed of Ming Yuanzong's genius disciple Ou Ranman's cultivation can be ranked in the top few in the hundreds of years of Yunling mainland, and they have already cultivated to the 5th level. Heavy repairs. This time they made a lot of refraction mirrors to let so many monks come to watch. Don't they just want to stand up, said the thin and middle-aged young robe monk with some pride, but now it's fearless to see Zai Wei Zong. I don't think it's a certain way. Maybe this Zai Wei sect has any powerful means. What about Haixianzong? Asked a young monk wearing a yellow vest next to the grey-robed monk. Haixianzong, the thin, middle-aged young robe happily smiled. It is estimated that it is good to live 1 or 2. The ancestors of Xuanhuan have already fooled twice. This time it is estimated that some people will be sent out to fool around. Hearing that the thin, middle-aged young robe monk was very knowledgeable and talkative, the monks around gathered a lot. And at this time, the people of Ziwi Izong had landed on the white jade platform. As soon as it came down, the amazingly sacred shrouded ayah immediately turned into a purple light, which was taken into the hands of the real person of Zixing. In addition to the real life of Zixing, the rest of the Ziwei sect who were present were all monks in split periods. There should be another sect person coming. Is it the Ming Yuanzong person, or the Haixianzong person? Suddenly, there was another chaos among the monks on the sea. It's so big and thick, the voice of a female cultivator appeared particularly clear in it, which made many monks unable to resist sweat. The yellow light coming from the fly is indeed thick and big. Waiting for the distance to be close, most of the monks present took a breath of air. This flying escape magic weapon turned out to be a 3-story topaz pavilion, with 4 yellow lights all over the body, and a square, like a fairy palace in the sky. The power is extremely amazing. Seeing this flying escape magic weapon approaching, Zai Wei Zong's gaze of the real person could not help but blink. Purple Star Deist, don't come unharmed. A lingering voice drifted far away from the top jade pavilion here. I thought it was Xianyuan Daiyu, and after a long time, it was Li Minghe Daiyu. Zixing said with real eyelid. The person who originally belonged to Ming Yuanzong arrived. Most of the monks present suddenly had such thoughts in their hearts. It was at this time that the top jade pavilion that had flew above the white jade platform suddenly disappeared, and more than 20 monks fell on the white jade platform. A monk headed looks more than 50 years old, with a white robe and ground, and hair tied behind her head with a green strap, looking very handsome and elegant. The aura exuded from his body was formed into a small, wishful shape, very mysterious. This person is obviously the master of Ming Yuanzong, Li Minghe, Jindan monk. The young monk, still dressed in a goose yellow veil, looks extremely handsome and free-spirited, and has a sense of standing tall, is the famous genius disciple Ou Ranmen of Mingyuan Zone. It seems that Xuanhuan Daiyu is very focused after landing on the platform. No one beside Li Minghe smiled at Zixing Daoren. Zixing Taoist nodded irreproachably, and didn't seem to want to talk much. After waiting a long time for some incense sticks, a white light appeared in the distant sky. The people of Haixianzong finally arrived. I saw that white light. It was a huge white jade lotus platform. The speed of this white light is not fast, and it looks a little unhurried. Seeing this white light look like this, Zixing real person's face was a little unhappy. Immediately Leng Hung said, Xianyuan Daiyu, but you let me wait. Isn't it time to come? Xuanhuan's ancestors laughed and uploaded it from the white lotus platform. The old man, the movement is slower than your young people. Besides, this sea hunting conference, each time it was 2 million inferior spirit stones, which was really uninteresting. Can't mention interest? Is Haixianzong sure to win this time? The tone is so big. The vast majority of monks suddenly heard their voices when they heard Xianyuan Patriarch's voice. But when Bailiantai flew close, as soon as he saw the Haixianzong monk standing above, most of the monks were incredulously widened their eyes and screamed, no. Behind the ancestor of Xianyuan, there were only a dozen people standing alone, and there was still a sedan behind him. Among the 10 people who showed up, 3 old men were obviously the elders of Haixianzong. The rest of the young disciples actually seemed to be almost crooked, and only one was a monk who divided the mind. It is a monk Zhou Tianjing. There is a strong contrast with the disciples of the other 2 factions, King II. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 288. No, Senior, I said that your lineup of Haixianzong is really too far away from others. Among the 10 young disciples of Haixianzong, the only one who divided his thoughts whispered to his ancestor Xianyuan. A sentence. This guy is of course Wei Suo. Now Wei Suo is wearing a dark blue vest with flaming stripes. Originally, he was already a low-level celestial exercise. He divided the practice of the 4 levels of thinking into reality. At the age of 7 or 8, I'm afraid I will immediately compare Oran Meng, who stands like a group of chickens on the white jade platform, as soon as I show up, but I don't know why. Now, it seems that his cultivation behavior is only a matter of dividing the mind. You are my true elder guest of Haixianzong, plus I have given you this Jingming vestment, and from now on you will give me some face and call my ancestors Xianyuan. Ancestors will not move. The voice of the voice entered Wei Sao's ear. To deal with them, you are enough to be alone. Do you still need someone to help? Okay, ancestor, but you have more disciples, so it won't make me too conspicuous, Wei Suo said secretly. Mingyuan Zong spent so much effort to get out of the refraction environment. When you want to be low-key, you can't be low-key, the ancestor Xianyuan continued to say quietly, so you ask for a high-profile, arrogant, a good deterrent to Mingyuan Zong and Ziwi Zong, who are not afraid of fierceness this year, are afraid of hard fists. The more you show them Yan Yan, the less they dare to provoke you and Haixianzong in the future. But I've always been used to danger and arrogance, and if I want to suddenly make me arrogant, I will be very uncomfortable. Xianyuan ancestor heard Wei Suo's words. Almost no Jindan period monk style called me to rely on. At this time, Zixing Real Man and Li Minghe had already swept away into the sedan behind Xianyuan Patriarch and Wei Suo. Sitting inside the sedan chair is Ji Ya holding Han Wei. The 2 Jindan monks swept away and found that they were not hidden amazing masters. Just listening to the real star of Zixing immediately smiled deeply. Why, listening to the meaning of Xianyuan Daiyu, is that these 2 million inferior spirit stones have too few colored heads. The ancestors Xianyuan and Wei Suo and others landed on the white jade platform. Hearing Zixing's words, Xuanhuan's ancestors laughed and said, Ziwixing Daiyu is very aggressive. Is the conference sure to win? Don't dare to say that you have a certain victory, but if you want to add a bit of color, I won't refuse it. Zixing really glanced at the ancestor of Xuanhuan indifferently. Oh, Li Minghe glanced at the real person of Zixing and said with a chuckle, if Zixing Dai really has this idea, I can still accompany him. It's time to add a lot of color. Good fellow, it seems that Ziwi Izong must have some powerful means this time, and wants to revenge the last arrow of the sea hunting conference. Here the two real stars of Zixing and Li Minghe. The dialogue of the Danish monks, thousands of monks on the sea, were suddenly excited. The more this kind of, the more intense the sea hunting conference. Okay, hearing Li Minghe's words, Zixing's real eyes flashed suddenly, and the surrounding sea seemed to shake. Since Li Daiyu said so, then I'll use 1,005 level high-level demon pill. Bet you how about 1,000 Yanchao Dan. Thousands of Yanchao pills, even if Yuan Zong started working with all his strength, it will take a year and a half to refine it. It's a big appetite. It seems that this guy, Zixing, really paid off this time. Wei Suo, you but be careful, ancestor Xuanhuan secretly whispered to Wei Suo. Yan Shao Dan, is it a panacea that can prolong Xiao Yuan? Why don't you get more such panacea? Wei Suo asked quietly. This Yan Shao Dan is still useful for monks below the Jindan period. But for Jindan monks like me, it is useless. Patriarch Xuanhuan sighed lightly. When you are successful in forming your own dandan, you will understand. The nourishment of Dankai is 100 times better than that of most elixir. Xiaoyuan is exhausted, mainly because Jindan is exhausted. The general medicine is useless. 1005th level high-level demon pill. 1000 pill Yanchao pill. This level of Yaodan and Yanchao Dan is also very rare for the monks who divide the period, let alone 1,000. In Li Minghe's eyes, there was a slight expression of shock, but he immediately said coldly without hesitation, okay. I bet that Ming Yuan Zong took it. Wait, at this moment of euphoria, Xuanhuan Patriarch suddenly inserted a sentence. Why? Zixing lively turned to look at the ancestor of Xuanhuan, and then looked at the lineup of Xuanhuan's ancestor, who looked a bit crooked, with a sneering in his eyes. Xuanhuan Daiyu, you Haixianzong, it's okay not to raise. You are wrong, Zixing Daiyu. The ancestor of Xuanhuan laughed, and a circle of yellow light emanated from him, obviously pressing the brilliance of Li Minghe and the real person of Zixing into darkness. I said that all three of us are also monks of Jindan realm, and there are so many friends to visit our 3 sea hunting conferences. Such a bet seems to be a little mad at me. Why, Xuanhuan Daiyu, do you mean that this bet is not enough? A clear sneer appeared on the corner of Li Minghe's mouth. As long as you Haixianzong can afford the bet, I will definitely follow Yuan Mingzong. Let me think about it. The ancestral ancestor of Xuanhuan thought with a smile and clapped his hands. Okay, it is better to say, if any sect loses, it will not be allowed to enter the West Sea to hunt monsters in the next 2 decades. How is it? What? Xuanhuan's ancestor said this. Wei Suo, who had no idea of the West Sea, did not feel much about it, but the monks on the sea around him all took a breath. The West Sea mentioned by the Yunling continental monk originally refers to a sea area on the west side of the Dead Sea of the Yunling land. There are a large number of monsters and beasts in the sea area, but most of them are between 3 and 5 levels. Monster, there is not much danger in hunting. So it can also be said that it is one of the main economic sources of these sects nearby. Among the 3 sects, if the other 2 sects are not allowed to enter the sea area, then these 2 sects are not only a great reduction in income, but also a great place to practice disciples, and the other sect, but you can get multiple benefits. These 2 decades are not allowed to enter. If the light is measured by the spirit stone, it cannot be measured by 2 or 3 million spirit stones. This bet of the ancestors of Xuanhuan is really too big, and it is completely affecting the rise and fall of a sect. Xuanhuan Daiyu, your bet, I can accept it. When Li Minghe heard the words of the ancestor of Xuanhuan, his breath suddenly became refreshed, and the temperature of the surrounding sea dropped sharply, making the distance white. The monks near Yutai all shivered together. After glancing at the group of disciples behind Xuanhuan's ancestor, Li Minghe narrowed his eyes and smiled. I just don't know if Zixing Daiyu dare to accept such a bet. The real person of Zixing instantly became dry and dry. If a monk wants to reach the Jindan period, he does not know how many storms and waves he wants to experience. Without a certain chance, a general monk cannot be a Jindan period monk. Like Wei Suo, until the split year period, she doesn't know how much danger she has experienced. But at this moment, the real person of Purple Star is not calm at all. The main bet is too big. Moreover, the ancestor of Xuanhuan was an old fox. Without certainty, it was absolutely impossible for him to make such a proposal. Time is almost up. At the moment when the real star of Zixing was a little speechless, Oyu Ranmen standing behind Li Minghe said so lightly. What do you mean by that? Zixing's face suddenly sank, and a surge of coercion rushed out of him. The juniors just want to suggest that if Senior Zixing is unwilling to add this color head, we can do it separately by Mingyuanzong and Haixianzong, Oyu Ran Mengshen said indifferently. This is really powerful. Seeing Oyu Ranmen's belt fluttering, he was still faced with the pressure of the Jindan monks as usual, floating like a fairy. The monk present suddenly felt that he was extraordinary, and he must have amazing achievements. Ragulaus. What identity are you, a junior? Let's talk and get you to intervene. Zi Xing's eyes flashed sharply in the real person's eyes, and the words went off, like an invisible sledgehammer hitting Oyu Ran Meng. Yes, I am only a junior now, but 20 years later, I will definitely go to Ziwi Izong to challenge Zixing's predecessor. Oyu Ran Mengshen did not change and looked at Zixing really humanely. Boom. As soon as Oyu Ranmen said this, the surrounding sea suddenly exploded. Too arrogant. Too domineering. Under such circumstances, openly challenge the Jindan monks. Very good, Zixing real person laughed angrily, long laughed. Oyu Ranmen, as long as you live today, 20 years later, I will be waiting for you in Ziwi Izong coming. Good. Xuanhuan ancestor, Li Minghe, I will bet with you today. If this sect is lost in the sea hunting conference, which sect will not be able to move in the next 20 years one step into the West Sea? I rely on. Ancestor, this guy is so sure, I think I'm very dangerous this time. Wei Suo couldn't help crying in the ear of Xuanhuan's ancestor when he heard Oyu Ranmen directly fighting against the real Purple Star. With a cry. Relax, I am very confident in you, Xuanhuan ancestor said, as long as you can remove this person, what you get at the sea hunting conference, you don't have to go to Zongmen. I'm relying. It's impossible that you wanted me to turn it in. Wei Suo rolled his eyes. Since Zixing Daiyu said so. Xuanhuan Daiyu, are you okay? And at this time, Li Minghe, who was obviously very cunning, smiled and his voice spread far away on the sea. Ah, no problem. Xuanhuan ancestor chuckled, said, you can start. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 289. What is this about? This gambling agreement was also added, and the sea hunting conference began immediately. The 9 elders of the 3 sects have begun to arrange some prohibitions along the outermost periphery of the Blackwood Islands. The other 2 sect disciples are very cold, not only a vow to win, but also the murderous look of killing all the elite disciples of the other party. But the 2 million spirit stone is not a gamble on the side of the Fun Haixianzong, with the ancestor of Xuanhuan. If you have anything to explain, please explain it first. Among the 10 young Haixianzong monks who are about to participate in the sea hunting conference. However, 7 or 8 people revealed their true feelings and cried. Senior brother, if I can't get out this time, I still have a bag of spirit stones hidden under the futon I am practicing. Senior brother, in the event that something happened to me this time, brother, please persuade sister and tell her to find another Shuangziu companion as soon as possible. Brother, in fact, I haven't told you anything. In fact, it was me who peeked at Sister Liao a few years ago that made everyone think it was you. What is this called? The monks who came to see the lively monk not far away from the surrounding sea were almost speechless. This bet was still proposed by the ancestor Xuanhuan. It is reasonable that Haixianzong should also have some secret weapons, but now this makes it similar to the Last Testament meeting. What is even more outrageous is that among the 10 young monks of Haixianzong, the only one who has rebuilt the imagination and looks very clear-eyed monk, actually shouted towards the rear, "Good wife, I love you, wait for me to come back." Hearing this monk's call, many of the monks onlookers couldn't help but yell in their hearts, "Go to die, what's the matter?" Even Xuanhuan Patriarch, who was obviously still on Zixing Real Man and Li Minghe, heard the monk shouting so obviously he couldn't laugh, the tiger's body shook. But Ji Ya sitting in the sedan chair was suddenly a little red, full of sweetness. Although Wei Suo often used to talk to her sometimes, she was shouting in the presence of thousands of monks. Of course, peace is different. Test Bone Age. An elder of Mingyuan zone wearing a miserable white vestment also seemed to be unable to pass it. In this case, he wondered whether Haixianzong, even if he was definitely miserable, would have to drag another sect into the water to let another sect cannot enter the West Sea to hunt monsters. With a cold scream, the famed elder Mingyuan zone shook his hand with a magnificent vibe, but a white prismatic crystal column was sacrificed. On this prismatic crystal column, there is more than one person tall, covered with water wave-like mysterious runes, shining brilliantly. Let's start. Obviously, the insidious and cunning Mingyuan sect master Li Minghe said without mentioning his eyelids. I saw 10 monks from Mingyuan zone preparing to participate in the sea hunting conference. One by one, they pressed their hands one by one on this peculiar magical instrument. It is obviously higher than the rest of the Mingyuan zone disciples, and proudly ranked last. Among the 10 disciples of the Mingyuan zone dynasty, when the hands of 6 disciples were pressed on this peculiar magical instrument, the entire white prismatic crystal column gave off a pale green brilliance. But when the hands of the other 4 disciples were put on, the prismatic crystal column would glow with other colors in addition to the whole body of green light. Some are red, some are blue, and finally when Oran Meng put it on, there were cyan and golden brilliance. Seeing such brilliance, the monk on the sea suddenly burst into excitement. While looking at Wei Suo who was doing these things with Wonky, he could not help secretly asking Xuanhuan Patriarch, "This color is different, what do you mean?" The ancestor of Xuanhuan explained, "This is the crystal column of the apprentice passed down from the Mingyuan sect, which was used by the Mingyuan sect to accept the disciples and recruit new disciples. It can identify the true bone age and spiritual root constitution. Even if it is somewhat difficult to detect, the hidden spirit root physique can also be found by this instrument, so that some good cultivation seedlings will not be missed. Now the real bone age is no more than 40 years old, it is green light, if it is more than 40 years old, it is dazzling white light. As for the brilliance in the middle, it is the relationship of the spirit root. The red is the fire spirit root, the blue is either the wood spirit root or the wind spirit root, and the blue is the water spirit root. As for Ou Ranman's cyan and gold, it is because he is 2 lines, 2 roots of wind and thunder. It seems that Ziwei Zone really wanted to upset Mingyuan Zone this time. Ancestor, what's the matter with this black light? Mingyuanzong's people tested bone age and confirmed that there was no white prism after age. Jingzhu was spotted by the elder Mingyuan Zong again, and was pointed in front of Ziwei Zong disciple. Ziwei Zong's disciples pressed their hands on it without any nonsense. Among the 10 disciples of the Ziwei sect, there are 8 disciples, all of whom are monks of the spiritual root, and all will come out with different colors. What makes Weizhuo very strange is that when a monk's hand is pressed up, in addition to the standard green light, the prismatic crystal column actually reveals a faint black light. This is the brilliance that Yuan Yang will let out. The ancestor Xuanhuan glanced at Wei Suo and explained. The more times, the darker the color. Yuan Yang leaked out. Wei Suo was stunned for a moment, and he reacted immediately. It is said that many exercises require Yuan Yang to be the first person to practice. There are still some exercises that are practiced in Yuan Yang's body, which is faster than those who pass by. The Ming Yuan zone people who cultivate this instrument seem to be very thoughtful, even this is qualified. Things are also taken into account. Soon after the reaction, I saw that the elder Ming Yuan zone reached out a little bit, and the prismatic crystal column had reached the ancestors of Xuanhuan and Wei Suo. Seeing that the rest of Haixianzong disciples were still in grace, Wei Suo was very curious and pressed the first one up. Wei Suo only felt that the tentacles were a bit cold, and there was no special feeling, but after the entire prismatic crystal column radiated a normal green light, the inside became dark, like black jade, and the color of black was so deep it cannot be described in words. So dark. Not to mention that the thousands of monks on the surrounding sea almost fell directly into the sea. Even the 3 disciples in the stands couldn't help but widen their eyes. So dark. Is this guy specializing in roads? How many times will it take to get so dark? What? Wei Suo was also sweating. Obviously, it is because of the practice of the Xuanxia Dafa method. During the double cultivation, Yuan Yang and Yunyan merged, and the cycle was endless. It seems that this crystal column thought he had done more times, so he became black like this. Because it was too dark, even the light of the 2 roots of Wei Suo's ice and fire was also obscured. The sweaty Wei Suo saw all the monks under the surrounding sea going crazy, and embarrassedly clenched his fists, saying, "I left." Experimental power. Seeing such a scene, the disciples of Haixianzong were also completely shocked by the powerful colors of Elder Wei. After returning to the gods, they all completed this step one by one. But after this step was completed, I saw a white-bearded elder from Ziweizong shouting like a opera, offering a golden washbasin-like implement. I saw this golden washbasin-like implement, inlaid with various gemstones, which looked colorful and gorgeous. With the elder infused with a real element, a golden brilliance radiated from this instrument, forming a door-like light curtain. Then, starting from the Ziweizong, the 3 monks who wanted to participate in the sea hunting conference all walked past this tent. When it was Haixianzong's turn, Wei Suo was also the first to lead through this tent. Seeing that there was nothing unusual about this curtain of light, Wei Suo could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. It turned out that this magic weapon of Ziweizong was named Sanking Jianbao. It is an ancient treasure handed down from the ancient times. As soon as a magic weapon above the upper level of the spirit order passes, the golden light curtain will react. Now Wei Suo has left all the unused things, including the piece of magical implement that he got in the Magic Eye Island and is still unavailable in the 4 layers of the mind. She only carried some essential medicines, and the magic weapon she used this time. However, there are 2 magic weapons with blood-feeding magic knife and doorplate flying sword that are actually more powerful than spirit-level high-level magic weapons. If the light curtain responds, the elders of the other party insist that their flying sword looks too strange. If the flying sword is not a magic weapon, then they will inevitably have to argue. But now the light curtains of the 3 Qingjian treasure pots have not responded, indicating that this peculiar ancient treasure also does not regard the peculiar blood-sucking magic weapons such as the blood-eating knife and the flat flying sword, mainly relying on the material and the power of the true Yuan Tao. Order magic weapon. After all 30 monks in 3 cases passed through the light curtain of the Sanking Jianbao pot, it was confirmed that there was no magic weapon above spirit level. The elders of the 3 cases and the rest of the characters all retreated to the back, a distance from the 30 monks. Obviously, this is also a customary rule, and I am afraid to do anything after the test. Since there is no problem, 2 Dao friends, Wei Ming Yuan Zone now arranges the refractive lens, should there be no problem. Seeing that there was no problem, Li Minghe turned his head to look at Xianyuan Patriarch and Purple Star. "Hurry up, I can't wait any longer. Xuanhuan ancestor haha smiled. Is this old guy confused? Li Minghe and Zi seeing lived in mind, could not help but such a thought. Seeing that the ancestor of Xuanhuan was so excited, there was no objection to the real person of Zixing. The two elders of Mingyuan zone immediately began to act. I saw 6 white lights shot from the hands of these two elders and flew into the extremely high altitude above the Blackwood Islands. It was 6 pieces of white chips with a length of tens of feet and a meniscus shape. After these 6 such large chips flew out, Li Minghe reached out a little, but he also sacrificed a peculiar light blue crystal column covered with many eye-like mysterious runes. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 290. Xuanhuan Daiyu, please check these teleporters. After offering the half-man tall light blue crystal column, Li Minghe reached out and struck 10 silver jade symbols into Xuanhuan's ancestor's hands. The real person of Purple Star also sent 10 pieces of the same looking jade symbols into the hands of Xuanhuan Patriarch with the same expressionless expression. These 3 specially refined teleport symbols have the same refining principles, but the power of the magic symbols has been deliberately adjusted, and the distance that each teleport symbol can move out is different. At this moment, the 3 elders have marked 30 entry points along the periphery of the Blackwood Islands. After waiting for 30 monks participating in the sea hunting conference, each of them extracted a teleportation symbol, and then inspired the teleportation characters to enter from the locations marked by the 3 elders. As for where to appear in Kuraki Island after activating the teleporter, it is up to personal luck. I saw that the ancestor Xuanhuan looked at the 20 jade charms, and also took out 10 identical jade charms. He shook his hands and mixed the 30 jade charms together. Huang wrapped these 30 jade symbols and suspended them in front of 30 monks who participated in the sea hunting conference. Take each teleportation symbol. Xuanhuan Patriarch glanced at the 30 monks and said lightly. The 3 monks of these sects suddenly sent out the true elements one after another, and ingested the jade symbols in the yellow light. Naturally, this happened by coincidence, and 2 people happened to see a teleportation symbol at the same time. Hurry to go in to find death. A disciple of Haixianzong's yellow shirt and a disciple of Ziweizong's red shirt happened to be photographing towards a teleportation symbol at the same time. And this Ziwei sect disciple, who was divided into 2 different levels of thought, was very arrogant, and with a lot of cold relying on his own cultivation as a disciple of the Haixian sect who was far superior to this Zhou Tianjing. It was really a pull. Bluntly grabbed this piece of teleportation into his own hands. The disciple of Haixian sect changed his face, and suddenly looked dare to be angry. It's okay, just take another piece. Maybe after this piece went in, I just met the first 6 high-level monsters, or just met 3 other monks. A voice came from the side. Elder Wei said yes, turning around to see the speaker. The disciple of the immortal sect suddenly looked a lot better, and then took another teleporter. As far as you are concerned about the cultivation of the realm, is it still the elder? The name of Ziweizong is very arrogant, and the disciple of a red shirt with a black mole on his left face suddenly flashed in his eyes and was murderous. The best, don't let me meet you inside. Fool. Wei Suo dismissed the red shirt student with a disdainful look, and spit out 2 words neatly. I rely on. Good. Hot. Wei Suo's voice was very clear. It spread far away on the sea. It was the hope that the more lively and the hotter the better. The monk was watching, and suddenly there was a burst of excitement. What are you talking about? The red shirt student didn't expect that Wei Suo would even swear straight and neatly. I said stupid, Wei Suo almost shouted. Aren't you deaf? Haven't you heard? Do you want to die now? Ziweizong's red shirt disciple couldn't help but violently started to act. Fool, Wei Suo looked at the monk with a look like an idiot. Dare you break the rules? Do you want to do it here? Don't you dare to call you a fart. You. The red shirt student's face was blue and white, fighting with Wei Suo. He was not an opponent at all. The most important thing was that he did not dare to start here. Shut up, now even the real person of Zixing feels very shameful, slamming thunderously, don't fight here, waste time, and get the disciples of the teleportation symbol, start now. Not only the monk in the red shirt, but also the monks of the Ziwi Izong glared at Wei Suo with a murderous eye, and then flew up, each flying towards a calibrated location. Let's go. After the other two monks were swept out, Wei Suo shrugged and said this to the rest of the Haixian sect disciples, before he hurried towards the three elders. The entry point marked on the periphery of Mudeo flew past. 30 entry points formed a semi-arc on the periphery of the Blackwood Islands. Let's start. After all three monks were in place, Li Minghe spoke these three words first. The sound of killing breath made the sky seem dark. Humph, Zixing snorted coldly with a dull complexion. Li Minghe said the beginning, clearly he wanted to create the feeling that he was the three bosses in front of so many onlookers. But the ancestor of Xuanhuan on the side just smiled lightly, thinking in your heart, Li Minghe, you still expect your genius disciples not to meet Wei Suo, don't provoke him, otherwise, this sea hunting conference ends at that time, you might be tempted to vomit blood. Finally started. In the silent watching of thousands of monks, only 30 monks were seen, each inspiring the teleportation symbol in their hands. I saw a continuous flash of silver, and the figures of the 30 monks disappeared one by one from the sea. At the same time, I saw Li Minghe stretch out his hand a little, and a real element that was obviously like a gold melt was directed toward the light blue crystal column covered with countless eye-like runes on the front. A series of light blue brilliances emanated from the crystal pillars. In front of the white jade platform, a blue glazed light curtain with a length and width of more than 50 feet was erected out of thin air. After this peculiar magic weapon was activated, I saw two other elders of Mingyuan Zone each take out a white circular crystal plate, and they all worked very hard to focus on the true Yuan inside. These two white circular crystal discs seemed to be used to control the 6 giant sail-like diopters suspended above the extremely high altitude of the Blackwood Islands. With the actions of these two elders of Mingyuan Zone, 6 giant sail-like refraction mirrors turned in the air. On the blue light curtain, a scene of some dark forest suddenly appeared. Then, like the rapid change of sight, the scene on the blue light curtain quickly moved to the front of the jungle. This is the site in the Blackwood Islands. After the monks gathered around the sea for a while, a burst of earth-shaking cheers broke out. It turned out that the refraction law of the Mingyuan Zone had to be driven by 3 monks at the same time, so that outside monks could see the scene on the island. And it seems that the 6-sided refraction of the realm of law can only transmit the scene of one part of the island to the light curtain outside. However, the scene that came out was very clear, as if there were a pair of giant eyes in the sky, swept across the Blackwood Island, and all the scenes that were seen were transmitted. This has also made thousands of monks who are not far away to see the bustling, very satisfied. The 6-sided giant sail-like refraction mirror in the sky swept continuously in the Blackwood Islands, and a monk figure suddenly appeared on the blue light curtain. It's Hai Xianzong's disciple. The monk was wearing a yellow robe. Almost all the monks he saw at a glance recognized that this guy was just before entering. He said to a black-robed brother beside him, "Brother, actually I haven't told you anything. In fact, it was me who peeked at Sister Liao a few years ago that made everyone think you were." The result was almost directly strangled by the monk Haixianzong, who was the black robe. I saw this monk of Haixianzong, standing next to a black muddy quagmire, looking scared. Then immediately took out a black conch-like magic weapon, and immediately inspired. No. Seeing this Haixianzong guy immediately inspired the magic weapon, almost all the onlookers were tight-hearted, thinking that this Haixianzong monk had already encountered an opponent or had discovered a monster. But to their astonishment, the figure of the Haixianzong disciple swiftly lay in a conch-shaped instrument that grew large in front of him, almost exactly allowing him to lie alone, and then puffed suddenly got into this quagmire. The refraction mirror was aimed at this quagmire for a while, and there was no movement, that is to say, this disciple of the Haixian sect was hiding inside, and he didn't come out at all. Another disciple of Haixian sect. The two speechless elders of Mingyuan zone continued to mobilize the refraction mirror. After a while, the monk who appeared on the blue light screen happened to be another disciple of Haixian sect. I saw this man wearing a silver vest, just crying to a younger brother beside him and telling him that he had a wonderful and beautiful picture book in the Nabeo, which was left in the quiet room. If he could not go back, the younger brother could take it and see the Haixianzong monk I saw fell in a dry valley covered with yellow rocks. No. What made the onlooker's eyes widen again was that after seeing the thief's head and thief's brain in a silver cassock disciple, he took out a yellow tile-like implement. After immersing himself in Xuanhuan and throwing at his feet, a burst of yellow gas surged. This disciple of the Haixian sect wearing a silver vest immediately fell into the yellow stone ground under his feet, and then the yellow stone ground again. The recovery was as before, and no monk was hiding underneath. Then this disciple of Haixian sect was hiding again, would never come out at all. These two are not enough, but when the refracting mirror continues to be searched, it happens that the third monk found is also a disciple of Haixianzong. This disciple of the Haixian sect, wearing a blue vest and a loyal look, can be said to have good luck. After inspiring the teleportation symbol, he was just in the middle of a giant wood forest, and he was surrounded by more than a dozen people. Huge black trees. At the moment, a big tree in front of this Haixianzong hung upside down a dozen white bats. The heads of these dozen bats are like the heads of little monkeys. This blue shirt disciple of Haixianzong is Zhou Tianjing's five-fold cultivation practice. It should not be a problem to deal with these monsters, just a good harvest. I depend. But what made the onlooker monks couldn't help but screamed was that this disciples of the Haixian sect, who looked very loyal and honest, took out an olive-like cyan artifact without hesitation and inspired it. Then, the blue light flashed, but the monk's body was submerged in a large tree next to it, and he didn't even want to hunt the monsters, he just hid. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Zy. Chapter 291. Are you mistaken? This is a sea hunting conference, not a hide-and-seek conference. Most of the monks' eyes couldn't help but gather on the ancestor of Xuanhuan. These Haixian sect disciples hid unexpectedly and directly, obviously it was planned in advance. If at this moment Wei Suo could see the scene on the blue light curtain, it would be impossible to help jumping, scolding the ancestor Xuanhuan, and dying the old fox. The ancestor Xuanhuan did this, and it was obvious that a Haixian sect disciple did not want to lose, but wanted him to stand alone. But now it is certainly impossible for Weizhuo to see the scene on the blue light curtain outside. Now Weizhuo is on the sea. This sea surface is located in the middle of several small islands, but this area is about 10 miles away from the sea, but there are many reefs out of the sea, and there are many vine-like plants. These dense vine-like plants are pulling a lot of dead branches, decayed wood, etc., so that this place does not look like the sea, but like a swamp. Because the map of the Blackwood Islands has been remembered for a long time, Wei Suo, who was sent by the teleportation character here, immediately recognized that this place was called the Rotwood Sea and was located on the west edge of the Blackwood Islands. Just now Wei Suo found out that the starting point of the arrangement of the three elders is also a circle with a similar small transmission circle, which can send people out of 300 or 400 miles. This teleportation symbol is only in these 300 or 400 miles. With the addition of a paragraph above, the teleportation symbol of maximum power can only send people 200 or 300 miles. Speaking of which, Weizhuo had drawn the most powerful teleportation symbol, because this rotted wood distance from Weizhuo's teleportation point was almost exactly 600 li. The consciousness was released. After sweeping around, Weizhuo released the black water lily first, and then swept towards the nearest island. Finally not a monk of Haixianzong. At this time, As the refracted realm suspended in the air swept through, a monk of the Xuanhuan quickly appeared above the blue light curtain. The monk of the Lagerstromia sect was originally wearing a yellow vest, but at the moment his cassock would change with the surrounding scenery, making the monk of the Lagerstromia in the jungle. It is hard to see clearly in China. After swiping forward for a while, this disciple of Ziwei sect, who was divided into two different situations, stopped silently. In the woods in front, there is a large cobweb of Zhangjibai. 4-level mid-level monster, bone spider. In front of a white giant net with a desktop size of at least 5 or 6, squatting a giant spider with long hairs and yellow hairs, about 3 or 4 basins in size. A white light suddenly emerged from the hands of the Ziwei disciple. The giant spider in front of him just wanted to spit out something. Suddenly, he was stiff, and there was a layer of ice on the surrounding giant nets and branches. White light passed directly through the mouth of the giant spider, and the yellow giant spider turned into an ice sculpture without any resistance. Bai Guang then revealed from behind the giant spider's brain, and flew back to the hands of the disciple Ziwei Zone. As the cracks spread, the giant spider's body immediately turned into a pile of crushed ice. Spiritual high-level ice magic weapon. The monk's onlookers suddenly exclaimed. This bone-bearing giant spider is also a 4th-level middle-level monster at any rate. Judging from the situation that the ice-cold breath that had just been dissipated from this magical instrument was frozen stiffly, white light is definitely a rare spiritual high-level ice magic weapon. In a cry of excitement, I saw this Ziwei sect disciple reached out and photographed a yellow fairy from the broken ice, and then waved his hand without turning his head, and the white light flew towards the upper left immediately. But again, a bone-rot spider that had slipped to the upper left of him when he didn't know it also broke into a block of ice. In just a moment, this Ziwei disciple killed all 6 decayed spiders in the nearby woods, and got 6 4th-level mid-level demons. Seeing such a scene, Zixing real person and several elder Ziwei who watched the battle, could not help but a glorious appeared. But at this moment, I saw a place in the Blackwood Islands, and suddenly 2 flashes of different glazes suddenly appeared. Yep. The elders of Mingyuanzong's eyes flashed fiercely, and they immediately controlled the refracting mirror to flash towards that place without hesitation. Scenery along the way in the Blackwood Islands flashed quickly on the blue light curtain, and suddenly a green shadow flashed by. There was also a monk on the way through this refractive lens. However, the 2 elders of Mingyuanzong did not pause. They first turned the refraction mirror to a place where someone was obviously fighting. It is the disciple of Mingyuanzong and Ziwei. All the monks on the surrounding sea were suddenly completely excited. I saw the 2 sides of the fighting method, a Mingyuanzong monk wearing a purple dress, with a somewhat narrow face, and a Ziwei sect disciple wearing a black scaly vest, with a burly figure and a fierce god. At this moment, I saw the Mingyuanzong monk wearing a purple clothes. The frontal expressionless imperial officer was a giant ring-shaped defensive weapon burning a blazing flame. The burly figure of the Ziwei sect disciple, who had a fierce face, was the imperial envoy with 2 golden lights, and he kept fighting towards the Mingyuanzong disciple. The sparks splashed on the giant ring, making Zixing real people and the Ziwei monk watching the battle, all the glorious gods flashed in their eyes. This Mingyuanzong monk looked down, and it seemed that he could only get the magic weapon of the imperial giant ring. Keep up and down, there is no counter-attack at all. Among the scenes coming from the blue light curtain, I saw the disciples of Ziwei sect with that fierce god, and the proud appeared clearly in his eyes. Go to hell! Judging by his mouth shape, he clearly shouted. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and saw another extremely fierce fire snake, suddenly swallowed from above towards the head of Mingyuanzong monk. But at this moment, the accident happened. A black light suddenly rushed out of the land below the monk Ziwei. The pride of the Ziwei sect disciple, who was a fierce god, had just solidified in his eyes, and it was too late to stop the imperial dangling black shield that was suspended in front of him, and he was suddenly blocked by this black from the foot. Mang passed by. A blood spring burst out of the head of this crepe myrtle section. This disciple of the crepe myrtle sect who had just seemed to have a dominant position was suddenly killed. The two golden lights and black magic shields immediately lost their aura on the ground. The two golden lights are two semicircular flying blades, and it looks like the two can fit together. A glorious god flashed through Li Minghe's eyes, but his face was still silent, as if he was used to it. The face of Zixing Real Man and others suddenly became a little ugly. This Zaiwei sect disciple is also a monk who divides the dream into two. And this monk, but only 30 years old. 23-year-old monks with divided thoughts are worth at least a few million inferior spirit stones for a sect. In the blue light curtain, I saw the long and narrow face of Ming Yuan's own monks, unhurried imperial guards blocking the roaring fire snake that fell from the top of his head. Then took out a slave bag, and the black light flew back into his slave bag. It was a black crocodile monster. Ancient devil crocodile. 5th level high-level wind and earth monsters that can fly away. Among the monks watching on the sea, someone immediately shouted the name of the thing. This Ming Yuan's own monk actually understood the law of slave animals and raised monsters. I saw that the Ming Yuan's own monk put away this monster, and immediately wiped away all the things from this Zaiwei zone disciple. Then he quickly flew into the jungle on the left. The refraction mirror failed to keep up with it for a while. After the two elders of Yuan zone glanced at each other, the refraction mirror turned around, but it swept toward the area where the blue figure of Fang Cai was. I depend. It's this guy. Some thieves' green figures appeared in everyone's eyes again. I saw that the monk who was secretly standing behind a large stone was the only monk of Haixianzong, which was Weizhuo, who made the prismatic crystal column very black during the previous test. 2. Invisible vest? Isn't it? Hiding again. What made many monks who hadn't recovered from the thrilling fights in front of him was that the thief Weizhuo reached out and grabbed a vest and put it on his body, then his figure went from the place, disappeared. The ancestor of Xuanhuan and several elders of Haixian city were stunned for a while. The ancestor of Xuanhuan did not know that Weizhuo had such a magic weapon. Speaking of which, Weizhuo is now in the quadruple cultivation period, and has no fear of most monks, holding Suo Xing's idea of making a fierce name, so only invisible vestments will be used at this moment, otherwise Xuanhuan old it was difficult for Zio to see Weizhuo using such a magic weapon. The cloak of invisibility is very rare, but when we saw that Weizhuo was going to hide, the faces of the two elders of Ming Yuan zone immediately appeared. A disdainful god turned the refraction mirror, and went to something else. Place to go. The overwhelming majority of the practitioners present also despised Haixianzong even more. But, suddenly, the scene on the blue light curtain violently flicked, and a red figure appeared. A red figure was put out in a dense forest more than 200 feet away from Weizhuo. Coincidentally, this monk wearing a red shirt was also the monk of the Zaiwei Zong who had a quarrel with Weizhuo when he chose the teleportation symbol before. This Haixianzong guy is going to be miserable. All the monks at the scene who were speechless to Weizhuo suddenly had such thoughts in their minds. Because in the hands of this red shirt monk, there is a magic weapon like a green oil lamp. I saw the wick of this green oil lamp like magic weapon, exuding a puff of green brilliance, sweeping around all the time, sweeping hundreds of feet away. While sweeping through Weizhuo's hiding place, the red shirt monk of Zaiwei zone obviously looked cold and discovered Weizhuo's appearance. Obviously, this magic weapon in the hands of this red shirt monk is a strange magic weapon that can sense the existence of a monk within a few hundred feet. Tonight, there is a reading activity for book fans. The handsome jazz is poisonous for everyone to read the chapters of The Road to Heaven. Those who are interested can play. Room number is 63803, please see the notice in the book review area for details. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziwei. Chapter 292. After noticing Weizhuo who was hiding, on the blue screen, the Ziweizong red shirt monk immediately took out a black box-like magic weapon. It seemed that he wanted to sneak in, and instead attacked Weizhuo unexpectedly. Looks like. Upon seeing this scene, the monk present was a little bit of Weizhuo who couldn't help but sympathize with hiding. Boom. But at this moment, a giant column of thunder light suddenly appeared in the sky, and a huge roar came from far away. Immediately, this giant column of thunder and light hit a place in the Blackwood Islands fiercely. It's so rough. A cry of excitement from the nun rang on the sea. Sky-level spells. A cry of excitement from the men on the sea also rang. From this point of view, there is still a difference between the perspective of the female and the male at first sight. The female Xiu first saw the appearance of this thing, whether it was thick or not, but the male Xiu noticed that this giant beam of thunder was not useful in the end. I saw the air of Lei Gang scattered on the surface of this giant column of thunder light, all condensed into a pigeon-like shape and scattered around. I am afraid that this kind of power is only the power of heaven-level spells. Upon seeing this giant pillar of thunder, the minds of the two elder Mingyuanzongs were obviously shaken, and without saying a word, the six-sided refractive mirror swept towards that place. It's Ouyuran men. When the scene on the blue light screen changed and two monks appeared, the onlookers all reacted. Why were the two elders of Mingyuanzong nervous? One of the two monks was wearing a goose yellow vest, revealing a sharp, unforgettable atmosphere. It was the five-fold cultivation of Mingyuanzong's conception, and he was confident that he would break through in 20 years. Oyu Ranmen, a talented disciple of the Jindan monk. The other one, but a Ziwei sect disciple wearing a pale green se cassock, is a handsome, full-spirited Ziwei sect disciple who is a monk of the wind spirit root. In the picture on the blue light curtain, I saw a lion-headed eagle body with red feathers, which was being smashed by the thunder column and fell from the sky. The skin was blown apart by the thunder light, and it looked very much miserable. Fire feather griffin. This monster is very large, falling like a boulder. It is a 6-level low-level fire feather griffin. Below this falling fire feather griffin is a wide sea. This sea surface is located in the middle of the two big islands. At the moment, above the sea surface, a disciple of Ziweizong, wearing a light green vest, suspended a fist-sized green bead above his head. The beads radiate green light, forming a green light mask, which covers the disciples of Ziwei. A brilliant blue brilliance jumped around Oyu Ranmeng's body at an amazing speed under the imperial envoy of this Ziwei sect disciple. This brilliant blue brilliance is a slender flying sword with a length of 4 feet. In front of Oyu Ranmen is a magic weapon shaped like a willow branch. This thing looks crystal clear and keeps emitting green stripes, blocking every stab of Fijian. I saw that between his leisurely waved hands, 2 spiral-shaped golden lightning bolts instantly condensed into a thunderbolt in front of him, and suddenly penetrated into the body of the fire feather griffin that fell down. Judging from this scene, Oyu Ranmen actually dealt with this monster and Ziwei sect disciple at the same time, and still prevailed. At this time, at least 500 or 600 miles from here, Weisuo and the red shirt monk were in the forest, and 2 halos clearly appeared, depending on the situation should be Weisuo and that the disciples of Ziweizong wearing a red shirt started. Both sides opened, but this refractive lens can only see one place. For Elder Mingyuanzong and the vast majority of monks present, this is not difficult to choose. On one side is a 5-point genius disciple with an amazing split-mind realm and a triple-minded genius disciple, and a fierce monk duel with a flying sword, and on the other side is a monk Haixianzong who is hiding and hiding. Moreover, it is divided into 2 parts, and it is estimated that the other party was killed without suspense. So these 2 elders of Yuanzong didn't turn the refraction at all to see where Weisuo was. At the moment, the monk on the sea suddenly burst into exclamation. Oyu Ranmen and the disciples of Ziweizong, who have tripled the Neon realm, have seen huge changes and very hot scenes. I saw this monk Xuanhuan wearing a pale green se robes, and under a bad situation, he gritted his teeth and didn't know what secret method was applied. His hands turned into a green light, and he slapped it on his head. Fighting method makes you bleed first, and Xiangtai is also the first person in the ages. If Wei Suo was watching the excitement outside at this moment and seeing such a scene, it is estimated that he could not help but admire it. Because the monk Xuanhuan slammed his hands against his forehead, not to mention the mouth, even the eyes, nostrils, and ears, blood bleed out. An unusually painful appeared on the face of the monk. But at the same time, a light green brilliance flew out from behind this monk. Xuanhuan. The monks all over the sea suddenly blasted the pot. This light green brilliance is actually a 3-foot-long, full-body green sword, and there are many bamboo-like runes on the sword. Unlike the use of common magic weapons, the imperial flying sword relies on the sword tactics to split a consciousness and attach it to it. The monk in the split phase period can only control one flying sword at most. This monk Xuanhuan can control 2 flying swords at the same time. It is a secret technique of splitting the consciousness. This technique is almost like splitting the whole head in half. After casting the spell, it has a great damage to the consciousness. At the moment, this disciple of Xuanhuan exhibited this technique at once, obviously because Ou Ranmen's opponent was too strong, and he was directly desperate. Judging from the picture, the quality of the 2 flying swords is not low. If this Xiwei sect disciple is divided into 3 levels of cultivation, the power is definitely more than 2 spiritual high-level magic weapons. No wonder Xiwei Zongan and Mingyuan Zong challenged each other. The strength of this Xiwei Zong disciple Xuanhuan is not weaker than the general 5-level monk. Seeing such a scene, such thoughts appeared in the minds of most monks on the surrounding sea. But Ou Ranmen was still very casual. A dark green brilliance suddenly appeared in front of him. This dark green brilliance is a magic weapon like a sickle. But this magic weapon looks like a sickle. There is a person coming high, and the huge blade makes people feel a chill. At the same time as this horrific magic weapon came out, a radiance of green se poured out from Ou Ranmen's hands and wrapped around this magic weapon. Immediately, in the flash of blue light, this magic weapon had been cut to the blue mask outside the monk Xiwei. The green mask is just like a layer of paper, it is cut directly. 2 wind waves visible to the naked eye are separated along the flight path of Ou Ranmen. Although no sound can be heard, just seeing the scene that stirred up the 2 wind waves, you can see the magic weapon how amazing it is. The disciples of the Xiwei sect in the blue light curtain were terrified. 2 sword lights were suddenly recovered and cut on this sickle-shaped magic weapon. However, these 2 flying swords, which are stronger than a defensive magic weapon of the upper rank of the spirit order, were cut into 2 pieces without stopping directly. In the screams of the monks on the sea, the blue light just flashed, and the disciple Xiwei was divided into 2 sections by the lazy waste. This amazing Xiwei sect disciple was actually killed by Ou Ranmen. Seeing this scene, even the face of Jin Dan, the real person of Zixing, was white and white. This guy not only has heaven-level thunder spells, but also has spells that can cooperate with the magic weapon to enhance the power of the magic weapon. This strike may have the power of the middle-level magic weapon of the Dao rank. What kind of power is there? A monk with a split mind can resist it? Many of the monks present were dripping with sweat. If Dao Ti's magic weapon, Xuanhuan's people must be in trouble now. And now there is no voice from the Xuanhuan people, it can only show that this magic weapon of Ou Ranmen is at most the magic weapon of the top grade of the spirit order, but he has a unique spell that can match this magic weapon, just like plating the same as the layer coating, enhance the attack power of this magic weapon. It turned out to be a genius disciple who didn't come out of the world, and his strength turned out to be so great. On the blue light curtain, I saw that Ou Ranmen was very indifferent to put the body of the flaming feather griffin in the Nabeo sack, and then included all the things in the disciples of the Zhiwei sect that he spiked. In the following, a flash disappeared on the sea surface. The two elders of Mingyuan zone were proud in their hearts. So far, in the picture scanned by the refractive lens alone, Zhiwei Zong has lost 3 monks, and Minjai Yuanzong monk is in the limelight. After glancing at each other, the two elders of Yuan zone glanced at the Xuanhuan ancestor with unwillingness on one side, and then immediately turned the refraction mirror towards Wei Suo's direction. In the imagination of these two elders of Mingyuan zone, Wei Suo's ending at this time should be very miserable. What? But what made the eyes of these two elders of Mingyuan zone unbelievably wide at the same time, and at the same time, the real person of Zixing and the other elders of Zhiwei Zong almost jumped up, a thief's green figure, when the flash disappeared into the jungle in front. And in the open space behind, the body of the red-shirt monk was lying on the ground. The whole body was squashed as if it had been crushed by some big rock. Spike! There was an incredible air-pumping sound on the sea. That is, the moment Kaoranmen killed the Zhiwei sect disciple, the red-shirt monk was dead. In other words, this guy of the Haixian sect was actually a face-to-face, and he killed the monk who divided the two levels of thinking into seconds. The elders of Mingyuan zone, who was full of incredible gods, suddenly controlled the dioptric mirror, sweeping towards the direction of Wei Suo's escape. Path to Heaven. Author, Wu Ziyi. Chapter 293. Wei Suo's figure appeared again on the blue light curtain. Now that he had taken off that invisible vestment, although it still looked a little geeky, it felt different to all monks. I saw that he stopped suddenly after walking through the dense forest covered with a dark yellow chrysanthemum for a while. Then he stretched out his hand and grabbed the sky. A thick blue-black yang gas spewed out of his hand and penetrated into the forest in front. The trick was the same, and he photographed a head with 4 wings, more than half of them. Tall giant black ant. Then I only saw this guy, as if he was extremely skilled, and put this giant ant directly into Nebeo's pocket. Swoosh! A burst of air conditioning sound suddenly exploded on the sea. There are 4 transparent wings on this forehead, and the forehead of a giant ant with a height of half a person, a black armored drum, as if it was beaten by a bag. It is obviously a 4th-level intermediate monster. Iron-headed ant. But this is also a 4th-level middle-level monster, but he was caught by him with spells, and when he came over, it was obviously too dead to die. Heaven-level spells. Only heaven-level spells have such power. What was even more shocking to the monks present was that the greenish-black chi that Wei Suo just sent out seemed to spray at least 100 or 200 feet away. That is to say, his consciousness locked the 4th-level middle-level monster beast 100 or 200 feet apart. With such a strong sense, is he a Jindan monk? Seeing such a scene, let alone the purple star, the Ming dynasty patriarch Li Minghe, who had always been very determined, obviously changed his face, and his eyes could not help sweeping towards the face of Xuanhuan patriarch. At the moment, the eyes of many monks on the sea could not help but gather on the ancestor of Xuanhuan. How's it, Li Daiyu, do you think this elder of Haixianzong is not bad? Seeing Li Minghe turned to look at himself, Xuanhuan's ancestor haha smiled and said, it's just that Zhiwei is slightly worse. This child is only 26-67 years old at the most. It's already good to have a diligent practice. Li Minghe responded that he was also the first big guy to be on the scene. He shouldn't be so abnormal, so hearing Xuanhuan's ancestor's words, his expression immediately returned to normal, and he snorted coldly. But this child's consciousness is so strong, is it possible that Xuanhuan Daiyu got a heaven-level secret technique that can enhance the consciousness? Who said that Elder Wei is divided into 2 aspects of cultivation? Patriarch Xuanhuan narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled with his teeth. Li Daiyu, did you not see our Elder Wei from Haixianzong now? Isn't it the cultivation practice that focuses on one mind? Xuanhuan's ancestor said this, and the monks watching on the sea were shocked. Obviously, Listening to the ancestors of Xuanhuan, what kind of tricks or instruments did this elder Wei of Haixianzong cover up his true cultivation practices? And the most important thing is that the rest of the Haixianzong monks do nothing but just hide themselves. Only this elder Wei is hunting monsters. Does Xuanhuan's ancestors propose to increase the gambling contract before, but they want to rely on this elder Wei alone to fight against the other two elite disciples? Such an extremely shocking thought appeared in the mind of most monks present. Li Minghe and the real person beside Xixing changed their face again, but suddenly, a bright smile appeared on the corner of Li Minghe's mouth. I've really lost my eyes, but Xuanhuan Taoist, your elder Haixianzong's luck looks a little bad. Yes, it seems that luck is a bit bad, Xuanhuan ancestor said quietly softly. Eileen, 1-2. There was also a cry of exclamation on the sea surface. I saw a dark blue vine plant wrapped around a small tree in front of Wei Suo on the blue light curtain. Many of the long pods on it suddenly burst out. Seeing the shaking of the surrounding trees, it seems that when the pod burst, in addition to making a loud noise, it also burst out a stream of air. Wei Suo, standing on a dark yellow wild chrysanthemum, immediately slammed, quickly sacrificed 4 black lotus petal-like defensive magic weapons, and took 2 magic weapons on his hand. At almost the same time, in the dense forest in front, a yellow, blue and 2 glories of light appeared, one from the left and one from the right. Wrapped in 2 yellow and blue auras respectively, they were 2 monks of Mingyuan Zone. The first monk of Mingyuan Zone on the left wears a yellow scaly coat, which is very thin, and is half the head shorter than Weizhuo. The yellow light mask outside the body is the coat from the thin monk issue. It is obvious that this cassock on the thin Mingyuan Zone monk is also a rare commodity. The one on the right is the Mingyuan Zone monk who had been swept by the refraction mirror before. He knew the law of slave beasts and carried a 5th level high-level ancient devil crocodile monster. The monk Mingyuan Zone, who had a long and narrow face, had reached out a little when he appeared, and sacrificed his huge ring-shaped defensive magic weapon burning a blazing flame. This Mingyuan Zone monk is a monk with 2 levels of thought, but the 5th level high-level ancient demon crocodile on his body is also equivalent to a monk of Zhou Tianjing with 5 levels. On the left, the thin Mingyuan Zone monk wearing a yellow scale vest was more important than the narrow-faced Mingyuan Zone monk. In this way, Wei Suo is equivalent to being directly trapped in the circumstance of a 3-fold divided into 1, a double divided into 2, and a monk of Zhou Tianjing's 5-fold. It is no wonder that Li Minghe will proudly say that he luck looks a bit bad. The 2 deists, it was fate to meet here. I don't know how to call them. When the sea hunting conference is over, we must get closer. Right, I don't know if the 2 deists hit how many monsters are there? Chi Daiu, are you going to read lip surgery? The elder of Haixianzong will still say the same thing, want to make friends with these 2 Mingyuan Zone. At the left rear corner of the bio platform, several monks looked at a chunky middle-aged monk wearing a blue brocade next to him in disbelief. But he did say so, the short monk surnamed Qi was also helpless. It turned out that he could read lip surgery, and we could see what Wei Suo and the 2 Mingyuan Zone monks were talking about. Why, would you read lip surgery? This voice was heard by Li Minghe. Under his eyes, an imperceptible treacherous look flashed through his eyes. Since you can read lip surgery, speak loudly and let everyone listen. 2. The younger generation obeyed. Hearing the Jindan monk said this, the short fat monk didn't dare to ignore it, and immediately looked nervously. Are you kidding us? If you kill yourself, we can reward you with a whole body. The chunky monk immediately said what the long-faced monk Minjai Yuanzong said. Isn't it? Our 3 monks are all good brothers, what are we doing? So much nonsense, it seems that we still have to deal with you. It's not easy for everyone to practice. Let's discuss it in private. All the monsters on my body will be given to you. Then you just haven't seen me. After going out, we are still good brothers. But I know that there are a few female practitioners who are very good. I depend. Hearing this, most of the monks on the sea were stunned. What kind of monk is this elder of Haixianzong? The two Mingyuanzong monks were also stunned. The thin monk said afterwards, unless you give us all the magical objects and treasures and other things on our body, we can also consider putting you a way of life. It seems that there is no negotiation. Which one of you will go first? Who comes first? Are you an idiot? Of course it is the two of us who beat you one. Everyone is a monk who divides the environment. You still have to beat me too and bully me. Since this is the case, then I can only call my brother out to help. At the same time that Wei Suo said this, Xuanhuan flashed, and beside him, every few feet, there were three identical avatars. The monks watching on the sea were shocked to see such a scene. The two Mingyuanzong disciples didn't rush, but just looked at Wei Suo like a monkey. You are a kind of phantom magic technique to scare anyone? You have a black water lotus defense magic weapon outside your real body. There is nothing outside the fake illusion. This real and fake body can be seen at a glance. You are an idiot, and are we still idiots? The vast majority of monks on the sea heard the chubby monk Chi's voice, and suddenly rolled his eyes, thinking that Wei Suo was indeed an idiot. But at this time, almost all monks unbelievably widened their eyes. We saw that Wei Suo continued to inspire dozens of magic symbols. That plus me brothers, can you still see at a glance? After these dozens of magic symbols were inspired in front of the two monks of Mingyuanzong, in addition to the three avatars without black water lotus, there were more than a dozen more people with black water lotus Wei saw. Now, let alone the two Mingyuanzong monks, even so many onlookers on the sea, it was not clear at all for a moment, which one is the real Weizhuo. Does this elder Wei have many magical spells on his body? Okay, don't play with you anymore. Look at your sister flying sword. The chubby monk with the surname Chi at the moment read from the changes in the shape of the three avatars without black water lotus. Wesuo said this sentence now. Your sister. A large group of monks on the sea repeated in surprise. Your sister, then more monks screamed again. I saw a gate-shaped thing that appeared in front of one of the elder Wei. There is a sword handle for this golden cancan like the door panel. Is it really a flying sword?